Locust, if anybody here knows St. Louis area, that's the downtown area. I watched them build the arch.
Wow.
Out my office window.
What did you think about that?
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful because at that time I was working for the St. Louis YMCA and the executive offices. They had a residence there, and they had a board of directors, and every major company was on that board. They all wanted to give something, and one of the companies was Helmuth Obata and Cassabaum out of St. Louis, architectural firm. George Cassabaum was a board member that I interacted with every month at a board meeting, and Errol Serna designed that building, but Cassabaum's firm built it. It's solid stainless steel. We watched it go up, except hollow for that little elevator to go up and down it. But I watched it, and John and I married just before they put the top together, so I didn't see it completed. I have been back since,
Okay.
and been up in it.
Okay, so now when you left home and went to St. Louis, did Uncle Jenny go with you? Was he already there? Or?
He actually had gone a few months before I did. We had some relatives who lived there, so they sort of were an anchor place for us to go to. He'd been there a few months, but shortly after I got there, he was drafted into the service, and so he left and was gone for a couple of years. But he got into the special services because he was a musician. So he didn't ever have to leave the United States. He was stationed here all the time. And there is where he met Chuck Glazer of the Glazer Brothers. And they were in a band together, and that started the Nashville connection.
In St. Louis. Now, during this absence, when Jenny was in the service, then you were in St. Louis working. Did you continue singing?
I did. But I sang with a piano player. And just mostly gospel, mostly gospel music, but many auditoriums there in St. Louis. I just did it on my own. It was scary as all get out. It really was. But I was doing that on my own, and he was kind of doing things on his own. So we never really got back together to do any more. A little bit, but that was sort of the end of our duet career.
So, in case you don't know, do you all know who Jenny Payne is? No, you do. Do you remember a song, a band called Gary Puckett and the Union Gap?
Yeah.
Remember a song called Woman, Woman, that you get cheating on your mind? That's Jenny's song. And that was Betty's Uncle Jimmy. So when Jenny came back to St. Louis and you all were united, tell me about KSTL.
KSTL. I'll tell you how that all came about.
Okay.
I was working still, actually dating somebody, and I was kind of happy. And Jimmy saw an advertisement in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch for musicians interested in doing a USO tour. So he went to a meeting to see what this was all about. John did the same thing, and they both ended up that meeting together and just started chatting. So when he came home from that night and told me that he had met this banjo player, and he wanted me to meet him. And I said, I don't think so. I don't want a banjo player. He said, well, he's actually a disc jockey at KSTL. We're Skeet Janie. John, you remember Skeet Janie, I know. Was the country music DJ. He was sort of a star, a DJ there. And John had a weekend job announcing. And Jimmy said, well, he wants to interview local entertainers and songwriters on Thanksgiving, on the holiday. And I didn't want to go because I smelled a setup. So I said, I don't think so. So he came back and said, oh, well, no, he's not going to be there after all. It's a holiday, so he's got the day off. It'll be somebody else. So I agreed to go. Of course, I walked in there and there was John. And it was sort of the end of the story, or the beginning of the story then. He took me home that night, and he told me much later there was another young lady, performer, who was there. Her name was Patsy, and I can't remember her last name, John. You might have heard of her. He said, I actually had a date with her that night, but when you walked in, I went to her, which I always respected him for this. He said, I went to her and said, I'm not going to be able to keep that date with you tonight. So that was the beginning of us.
And then during this time, then when you were dating in St. Louis, and Uncle Jimmy had met Chuck Glacier, and I'm just assuming Tom Paul Glacier was a son or a younger brother. Was he part
Tom
of the
Paul was the eldest of the three. Chuck was the middle one, and Jim was the younger one.
Mm-hmm. Had Jim already established and Chuck a situation in Nashville in that music scene?
Yes, actually they were from Nebraska, and they had just moved to Nashville to work with Marty Robbins. And the three of them actually did all of those harmony parts on El Paso.
Oh boy, really?
That's what they had done at the time.
I have that album still.
And interestingly, they did that in one take.
Oh man. And we're not talking even tape.
Oh no.
So we're talking vinyl or acetone.
Yes, it was. So that was what Jim was doing. He was writing some. And so Chuck introduced Jimmy, brought him to Nashville, and introduced him to the other guys. And John also came and brought some of his songs and met Chuck at that time as well.
And the band, the trio, the Ozark Mountaineers?
John's group was the Ozark Mountain Trio.
And they were performing while were you all married at that time?
They were performing before we married. They'd been together for some time. We married during the time he was with the trio. But shortly after we married, it sort of broke up because we moved to another state.
I see.
And that was not easy to get together for gigs then.
Were you two beginning to perform together?
Well, we did, but I didn't really want to because I was not into bluegrass. I'm sorry, but I was not into bluegrass at that time at all. I liked country okay, but I really liked gospel music better. And many times John would want to play when I would sing, and I said, "Would you play the guitar, not the banjo?" And he would accommodate me. He was very, very good on the guitar too.
She really does. She don't want to play.
But one thing he did do, and I loved his fiddle playing, and he was really sweet. After we married, he knew this is what it would take to make me feel better. He would play "Faded Love." Anytime I needed to be calmed down, he knew that was my favorite song, and he would just serenade me with "Faded Love." It was a good thing.
That's something. So when the Ozark Mountaineers broke down, you all moved to the other state. That other state was Tennessee.
No, we moved to Clinton, Illinois.
Clinton, Illinois.
He was with WHOW there in Clinton, Illinois for a year, and it was during that time that he met and started working with the Bray Brothers.
And who were the Bray Brothers?
Oh, they were, I think they only had 2 albums out total. Because Nate Bray they were a fabulous, fabulous bluegrass group. Harley Francis and Nate Bray, and they worked with Ray Cravens and Pat Burton. They were very well known in Southern Illinois. But Nate died very young. He had cancer, and it sort of broke up the group. There's one still. Francis is gone, but Harley still lives in Seattle. I saw him last year. He came back to Illinois for a family reunion, and John Fabke at MTSU, they were dying to do a documentary on the Bray Brothers, and so I located Harley, and he told me they were coming back for a family reunion, and I said, "Well, can we crash your reunion?" So John and I drove up to Illinois and spent the day at a family reunion, played music with Harley, and now they're working on a documentary of the Bray Brothers.
And who would be posing this documentary, do you know?
Who would be what, I'm sorry?
Who would be posing this or producing this documentary?
I think it's John, isn't it, Katie, that's working on that?
Is it John Fab?
Yeah.
Okay.
With the Bray Brothers. He was wanting to do a documentary on them.
I don't know a whole lot about it.
And so at that reunion, it was really great what comes out at family reunions, because some of the relatives had taped the Bray Brothers, and they had just reams of tapes, and they said, we'll let you see these. So the MTSU has digitized all of those now. So it's a real treasure trove there.
I see. So that these tapes, will these be made available to the public or just used exclusively in the documentary?
I'm not certain about that. You'd have to check with MTSU and see, but maybe on NPR or something like that.
Okay, and also to johnhartford.com is a great source to learn more about the music and the archives. And does John Bobke have a website with is it Middle Tennessee?
It would be through the Center for Popular Music at Middle Tennessee State University. I don't know if there's anything up there right now, but I know that they collect a lot of history of these old, obscure, musicians and groups and things like that. They do a good job.
Those are treasures. So from Illinois, did you see a future? Did you see a development taking place that gave you any indication of where your life was headed?
Absolutely not.
So it was on the fly.
Did not. I just met this guy and fell in love with him, and we just fit together, walking, and we just had a lot of fun, and life with him was always very exciting. There was never any, honey, I've got this offer, let's talk about whether we should move here or here. I never got any of that. Ladies, if you've had it, you're very fortunate. He would walk in one evening and say, oh, by the way, we're moving. Well, where to this time? And it was always another state, The last time it was California. And aside from that, as we drove out to California when the Smothers Brothers asked him to come out there, we went for 3 months. We packed all our things here and we just went to go out for the summer, do that show. And in the middle of the desert, we had Jamie was 3 months old, or a little older than that at the time. And he was in the back of a RVW, little playpen back there. And I just suddenly knew, in the desert, and I just suddenly knew, and I looked at John and I said, we're not coming back, are we? He said, no, we're not. Jeez. And we didn't. I did.
This is Illinois to California?
No, we went back to Missouri.
Okay.
That man took me back 10 miles from where I was born.
And you love that, didn't you?
I just couldn't believe he would do that. Why? I've tried so hard to get away from here. 10 miles from where I was born, and we lived a year there.
And what kind of work did you all do there during that year?
Well, during that year, I didn't do much because I discovered I was pregnant with Jamie, our first child, and he worked. So, but I had family around, and I would visit. We did a lot of shows, local shows. I tell Katie about this. She can't believe I used to sing at the IGA. But John did a lot of advertising. He was the disc jockey there. And they loved his voice, and they wanted him to do all their commercials. So he would do all these commercials, and he didn't even know how to pronounce Smoke Joe. He called me one day. He got on the radio and called it Smoke Jowl.
Me too, I get that. Joel.
And somebody called him and corrected him. So he calls me, honey, how do you pronounce this? Anyway, so I told him. But they would hire us as a family group to come over and sing for when they would have specials in their store. This was the town of 1,500 people.
Yeah.
That was kind of fun. He loved that life. He loved it, and everybody loved him. He had quite a following there.
Well, from this area, then you went to California to work with the Smothers Brothers. How did that connection happen?
Okay, the trek from Missouri, when we were there at KTCB in Malden, Missouri, then we came to Nashville from there. And that was in 1965. Jamie was 3 months old. It was in 66 is when he wrote Gentle in My Mind.
Okay.
We were living in a mobile home on Lebanon Road in Nashville, and we had heard about this movie, Dr. Zhivago, everybody was raving about. So we went with a couple and met some more. In fact, we met Jim and Jane Glazer. They went there too, and saw that movie. And both of us were just wowed with it. Katie said, I don't know what the attraction was. She didn't really like it.
That wasn't my favorite.
A lot of snow.
A lot of snow, very cold and dark.
And it was, but it kind of hit a note with both of us. And we got back to the trailer, and I got Jamie to bed, and whoever was, I think Jimmy was watching him for us. Got him in bed, and John said, honey, I need to go put some things down. I said, okay. And he literally did come back out in about 20, 25 minutes. He said, can I play this for you?
Mm-hmm.
And we sat there on the couch, and he played that for me for the first time. He said, what do you think? And I said, well, I like it. I like it. So he made a quick little demo that night and took it in to the publishing company the next morning, and Chuck Laser heard it, and he said, I need to show it to Chet. So they left out the back side of 801 16th Avenue South, went down the alley to Chet's office and played that for him. And on the strength of that tape, they signed him to a recording contract. They did 3 albums with them. But then they said, go write a whole bunch more songs like this.
So
No
now,
pressure.
to get the timeline straight, in my mind, from Illinois to California before General on my mind?
Yes. It was St. Louis where we met, Illinois, back to Missouri. We were in Fulton, Missouri before we were in my hometown. 2 places in Missouri. Missouri to Tennessee and Tennessee to California.
And did the Dillards, I know they were migrating westward at that time. The connection between you all and the Smothers Brothers show, this was from Illinois to California.
Not Illinois with the Dillards. John had known them years before I met him. He and Douglas had been friends for years, and Rodney, they'd worked together. Douglas had gone on to California and was working with Sweethearts of the Rodeo and some of those people already out there. And I'm not sure what Rodney was doing, but he was out there too, because when John and I lived there, Rodney was married to a lady from California, and we spent a lot of time together as couples there.
And we're talking mid-60s?
This was 60, we went out in 68, so it's like 68, 69. And
Okay, so this was after General on my mind.
yes, General Maman, he wrote it like in 66, and it was recorded in Buckland and all that happened in 67.
Okay, I have one of your CDs that has a bluegrass straight chord version of General on my mind, I believe with Mike Seeger. And
Retrogress?
I believe it might be that. And yeah, it blew me away when I heard it. I thought, this is not what I'm hearing. What happened first there? Was that did that come later as an experiment in straight chord bluegrass? Do you know?
The first time I ever heard it, he did it with a guitar, and it was just nice like the way I preferred. And by the way, he did it better than any of the 600 people who recorded it after him.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
If you don't have this anthology of all of these recordings, it's available probably at the Pavilion now.
It is, and actually we have a limited supply. We had a supplier issue right before we came, so what we have here is what we have for the next several weeks anyway, so go get it. But I think the version of Jill on My Mind that's on that CD is either that demo or the one that was right after it. It's a very early demo, and you can hear some of the chord changes are different.
And what's the demo? Okay, and also, if you don't have a Pilot of a Steam-Powered Aeroplane by Andrew Vaughn, are you familiar with that book? It's talked about in detail at our website, and also the festival website, and also johnhartford.com. But there's a lot of fascinating history about the development of the newgrass and the rootsgrass movement in that book. But now, back to Betty. When you heard this song recorded in General on My Mind, and all of a sudden you knew hit was going to happen there, Glenn Campbell, tell me about that. How if you want to.
You really want to know about that?
Only if you want to tell me.
Boy, I knew something was different, and a little fearful that my life's about to change.
I wondered about that.
Yeah. But it happened so fast, so fast, and I was thrilled at the success. But when I would stop to think about it, I think, how is this going to impact things? And John's mother, John knows Mary, knew Mary and Carl. John's mother said, "Betty, I'm afraid this may change John." And I said, "Oh, no. His feet are flat on the ground. He's rock solid. You know, it's not going to impact him at all." And it did. It did. I mean, it was enough to knock anybody off their feet. It was too much so fast. It really was.
Well, you came back home to Nashville.
I did.
And what I would like to know is when you first went to Nashville, initially, this was early 60s?
65.
Nashville now has such a reputation, besides being a music center, it has such a reputation amongst us, thanks to the series, as being a vicious town towards like new songwriters. There's so much music headed in there. When you went there initially, what did you experience in this business? Was it fairly wide open, or was it convoluted with musicians then?
In 65, it was much more accepting of kind of newer things. Especially, John was pretty new on that stage, and it was a little bit scary. You know, you had your traditional country stuff, and Chris Christopherson was doing some things, and Roger Miller were doing some things that were kind of out of the norm, and people had accepted them, but it was a little frightening, just like that poem you read about commercial, you know, that I reckon, that's exactly how John felt. He didn't want to have to write things that were commercially acceptable. So that was going on, and he battled that. He really battled that, because one of the things that RCA, you know, when they're paying the bills, they tell you kind of what to do. And those early records, they had a kazoo on them, they had violins, they had all this big sound that he didn't really want on there, but the producer decided. And you don't make waves when you've just signed a contract with a big company. But they did tell him about, Yesterday was a huge song by the Beatles then.
Okay.
Felton Jarvis came to John and said, "I want you to write a song like Yesterday."
Oh boy, sure.
Yeah. I was supposed to do that. No big deal. No big deal. So that's how he came up with the song Today. He wrote that in response to that request.
I'm going to listen to that deeper now. I listened to the song a lot.
I'm going to sing it on Saturday. So.
And what else? Okay, let's plug this Saturday set. You know, right now you're getting to know a lady who has seen a heck of a lot of music and who's a performer in her own right. And we're going to talk more about that. She's going to play a song here for you too. But Saturday at 2:30? 3:30 here, Betty and Scott Nelson and Johnny Plott of the Flatland Harmony Experiment have learned some of her songs. And who else will be performing? Marty
Javers, and he's sitting right back there.
Marty.
Wave your hand, Marty. Marty flew up from Houston to do this show with me.
Welcome, Marty.
And my grandson Liam is going to be performing with us as well, and Dan Andrew.
Oh, really? Yeah, Dan Andrew.
Dan's going to be playing fiddle with us. We're excited about that. I don't know where he is. He said he was going to be here at 2 o'clock today, so I've never met him.
And Katie's going to do a 10-minute yodel solo.
Exactly. Hard rock. Good luck with that.
Hard rock yodel. Well, after you've been here for several days on the campground, you couldn't normally yodel when you walk. It's kind of one of the things you do to hide your pants. Yeah. Well, so Nashville, before you left, then there was some hustle and bustle going on, and you made friends there before you went to California.
Yes, absolutely. The Glazers were, and still are, you know, they're families that remain. We're still best of friends. Jim's wife, Jim just passed, a month or so ago, but he and his wife and I are still very best friends. And Chuck's wife, Beverly, Tom Paul has passed, of course. You know, there's a lot gone, but we were very, very, very close. Did a lot of music together. And Jimmy was part of that. Jimmy and Jim Glazer wrote a lot of songs together, an awful lot of songs together. And it was family. It was a family kind of thing, and I kind of came back into that.
That's what I was hoping.
I did. It was a nice just safety net for me. I was actually invited by John's parents to please move to St. Louis. You know, when I left California, because they wanted the children and me to live there, and I seriously considered it. But Jimmy was here, and I had lots and lots of friends here, so I just decided to go back to Nashville instead.
And when you went back to Nashville, then did you begin working, or did you begin singing, or was Katie born then?
Katie was a year old then. She was born in California, in beautiful downtown Burbank.
Oh, downtown Burbank.
Yeah. I did a little bit, but mostly it was I said, those years of my life, I mostly sang for weddings and funerals. That was pretty much the extent of it.
And in California, you had an opportunity to take Linda Ronstadt's job at Kitty Rogers Band?
Well, not to take her job. I had an opportunity to audition for her job. I wouldn't have gotten it, but it was nice that they asked me to.
But you don't know you wouldn't have gotten it,
Oh,
right?
I'm pretty sure I would have gotten it.
And how did that come about? Was it just part of the loop?
Bill, let's see, what was his name? John's manager, Ken Cragen managed Kenny Rogers in the first edition, and a lot of those people. And they knew that position was coming up, and they knew I was a singer, so they just asked me if I would come and audition for it. But I had Katie was just a baby at that time, and John and I had discussed years before, because we had friends in the music business who had children, and I've even kept their children while they toured, while both of them toured, and I thought it was really, really sad. I felt sorry for the kids, and so we talked about that and said, we're not going to do that. You know, one of us is going to be with the kids. And he wanted it more than I did, so I stayed home and he did it. I knew that was a risk. I knew it was a big risk, and it's exactly what happened. But I feel like I gave the world John Hartford, you know? I didn't keep him, I gave him to everybody else. So
if I could add to that, you also gave the world to me.
Oh.
I appreciate you.
Thank you. Being a mom is the most important thing. Yeah, Leah wouldn't have been here either.
Yeah, being a mom.
Somewhere down the line. We would not be here had she not stayed home.
You wouldn't have been here.
That's right. You just don't never know what those decisions are going to bring about.
Well, that's true, and we're all very thankful, or I'm extremely thankful, because you chose motherhood first, because we love Katie and Lynn and Jamie and you, and we've become part of this family here in Big Wells, Indiana. Now, you've been coming to this festival for at least 7
Well, I've been coming for the last 3 years.
last 3 years. Yeah.
Hopefully I'll get to come back next year, too. I hope so.
Yeah, sure. You're going to be in Alaska?
I'm going to be in Alaska.
Wow.
I leave Tuesday.
Okay. We talked, and I know I'm just yakking, I'm sorry, because there's a guitar here, and you mentioned that we're going to do tall buildings. There's a story behind that you wanted to share.
About the in tall buildings?
Is that what you're going to do?
Well, yeah, I can tell. It's not surprising. People may wonder where that song came from and how John ever got that idea. I doubt if John Hotsey wonders, because he knew John really well. John never did fit in the mold of anybody else. He just absolutely didn't. And he came from such a structured, I thought, straight-laced family, until I became a part of the family, and I realized that they weren't quite as structured as I thought they were. They really didn't like doing things just because it was the norm. It goes way back to his maternal grandmother, to his mother's mother. I love this story. They were a St. Louis family, and the father, I think, had an insurance company, but he had to stay in town and work. And summers in St. Louis were extremely hot, so the family would be shipped off somewhere else for 6 weeks. They would go to Michigan.